public choice.
The increasing standards of living that so many of us are enjoying does seem to be resulting in increased damage to ourselves and others. So how can we protect the environment from the pollution damage that we're doing? How can we protect individuals from the harm of our passive smoking? What can be done to prevent the disappearance of fish stocks from our oceans? We may want less pollution and less depletion of our fish stocks, but are we prepared for the costs of achieving this? We also have a problem that there are other things we seem to be underproducing. We're producing too much environmental damage, but we're not producing enough healthcare, especially in developing nations. Now, we've seen that markets are a powerful way of making decisions about scarce resources. But it doesn't seem to be very good at solving problems such as these.
Furthermore, there are things which society clearly wants and values, but the market is not going to provide. National defence, for example. How do markets establish the provision of lighthouses? And even if the government provides these things, there's a problem. How much of these goods should the government provide? How can they make a rational decision about the optimal amount of such public goods?
Now, before we decide that markets can't handle problems such as these, let's recall from our previous studies why markets can be so valuable. And we'll do it by using the perfectly competitive model that we previously developed. Remember that when private firms produce goods, they have costs. The costs to producers are the costs to society, because the firm's costs are made up of purchases of scarce materials, land, labour, capital, and so on. A producer has to bid these resources away from other producers, and so has to pay the opportunity cost of the resources consumed. But the producer will only find this process worthwhile if consumers are willing to buy the output. So the benefits to society have to be worthwhile. We can show that such a market process leads to an optimal production level of goods produced. In doing so, we'll introduce you to the idea of private costs and social costs, and private benefits and social benefits. We'll then be in a strong position to see why the mechanism seems not to work in some industries such as fishing, cigarettes, healthcare in the developing world, and lighthouses.
The benefits of a price system are high levels of economic efficiency. The free market is truly amazing when it works. But the market system fails sometimes. It fails to produce some products, or it overproduces some products, or it even underproduces some products. When this happens, we call it a market failure. But we have to ask ourselves, if we had a true free market, would the market produce everything that we want? Would we have the variety of the goods and services that we desire? Would we have the convenience that the market provides us? Would we have schools? Would we have highways? Would we have national defense? The answer is yes, in some ways. We would have schools, but they would likely be private, and they would cost a lot. Would we have enough schools to provide everyone with a high school education? Would we have sufficient highways, firefighters, and national defense? If left to the free market, there would be too little of some goods and too much of other goods, because some of the full cost of the transaction is external to the transaction itself. The same is true with external benefits. When there are costs or benefits to anyone not directly involved in the transaction, an externality or spillover effect is created. For example, some people talk or text on their cell phones while driving. Does this impose a potential or a real cost on other individuals? Some of the issues for discussion in this presentation. Are market failures such as externalities a justification for government intervention into certain markets? What are the distinguishing characteristics between private and public goods? And what is the Freerider problem? When the free market fails to produce the goods and services that is deemed desirable by society, the government will sometimes choose to produce that good or service. These goods are called public goods. Public goods are products or services that would be underproduced in a free market because it is not clear who should pay or who is willing to pay for those services. Ideally, a price-controlled market system allows resources to move from lower value to higher valued uses through voluntary exchange. Economic efficiency arises when all mutually advantaged trades have taken place. So, are there circumstances where price system does not produce efficient exchanges? Again, the definition of market failure is a situation in which the market economy leads to too few or too many resources being drawn into a specific economic activity. That would prevent economic efficiency. Market failure is often addressed by government intervention. Externalities create a misallocation of resources. A negative externality results in an overallocation of market resources. A positive externality external benefits result in an underallocation of market resources. So how does the government attempt to correct for these externalities? Well, pollution is an example of a negative externality. So what is the opportunity cost when a negative externality is present? When there is a negative externality, a tax to the production of that good can lead to an efficient level of output. Because utilities do not bear the true cost of acid rain, they produce electricity beyond the economically efficient level. If the government imposes a tax equal to the cost of acid rain, the utility will internalize the externality. They'll pay for that additional cost. As a consequence, the supply curve will shift up from S1 to S2. The market equilibrium quantity changes from Q market level, where an inefficiently high level of electricity is produced, to Q efficient, where the economically efficient equilibrium of the quantity is produced. The price of electricity will rise from the market price, which does not include the cost of acid rain, to the efficient price, which does include the cost of acid rain. So using a tax to deal with a negative externality, some toilet paper plants discharge bleach into rivers and lakes, causing substantial economic and environmental damage. Explain how the federal government can use a tax on toilet paper to bring about the efficient level of production. What should the value of the tax be? So in solving the problem, one of the things that we're going to look at is our supply and demand curve. The market level would have demand and supply at a certain level, in this case $125, and producing 450,000 tons of toilet paper each week. The graph shows that at the optimal level of production, there is a difference between the marginal private cost and the marginal social cost. Therefore, a tax of $50 per ton is needed to shift the supply curve up from S1 to S2. When there is a positive externality, a subsidy can bring about an efficient level of output. People who do not choose to consume immunization can still benefit from them. As a result, the social benefit from immunization is greater than the perceived private benefit to young parents. If the government pays a subsidy equal to the external benefit, parents will internalize the externality. The subsidy will cause the demand curve to shift up from demand curve number 1 to demand curve number 2. As a result, the market equilibrium quantity will shift from the market quantity, where there is an inefficiently low level of immunizations, to the quantity that is efficient, the economically efficient equilibrium quantity. Producers receive a price efficient, while consumers pay the price, which is equal to the price efficient minus the subsidy itself.